right, so we're diving into fishing, a comprehensive exploration by Conrad Riker today.
Yeah, this book, it really digs deep into everything fishing.
I like what you did there.
He goes from like way back in history to, how the industry is today globally.
You and I both read it.
It's really fascinating.
It's a serious deep dive.
What I found so interesting is that he goes like way beyond the how-to stuff, like how to fish. He goes into the history and nutrition, even the psychology of it all.
So it's not just like for people who are already experts.
No, not at all. It's really for anyone who is even a little bit interested.
Cool.
So whether you're, just starting out or you've been fishing your whole life, you'll learn something new.
I'm already learning new stuff and we're just getting started.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of the key takeaways from each chapter.
Okay, sounds good.
And trust me, there are some really fascinating facts and stories in here. Okay, so chapter 1, right off the bat, throws us way back to prehistoric times.
Yeah, I was amazed by this.
2 million years ago, our ancestors were already fishing.
Can you believe that?
It's incredible. Riker shows us all this fossil evidence, and it proves that fish has been a really important part of people's diets for a very, very long time.
Wow.
He even connects fishing to, like, early migration patterns.
Oh, right.
Like, think about the Bering Land Bridge.
Okay.
Crossing. That would have been impossible without fishing.
Wow, so this isn't just a hobby.
No.
This is like survival.
Yeah, exactly. It was completely essential for survival.
And I guess to be able to explore new places.
And yeah, pushing those boundaries, exploring new places.
And then Riker takes us through how fishing methods have changed over time.
Exactly.
I'm guessing from like bare hands to all the fancy gadgets we have now.
You got it. He goes through everything from basic spears and nets used by, ancient civilizations to the compass, which was like a total game changer in the 15th century.
I bet.
That's what let fishermen really explore the open ocean.
That makes sense.
And then in the 20th century, things like sonar and GPS. Wow.
It's amazing how much technology has changed the industry.
It really is, but he makes a really good point.
Yeah.
Even with all this technology,
Yeah.
it still comes down to us, humans, versus nature.
That's a good point.
It's that balance.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Chapter 3 gets into all the amazing nutrition you get from seafood.
Yeah, this was fascinating.
Globally, people have been eating more and more fish.
Makes sense.
And for a good reason. It's a great source of protein and all these essential fatty acids and other really important nutrients.
Yeah, the book even highlights specific types of fish and all the health benefits they have.
Exactly.
Can you give us a quick rundown?
Of course.
Okay.
So, salmon,
Okay.
it's a protein superstar. You get like 39 grams of protein in one serving.
Wow.
That's almost 75% of what a grown man needs every day.
Wow, so it's not just delicious.
Right.
It's really good for you.
And then there's the omega-3s.
Right, those are good for your brain.
Yeah, your brain reducing inflammation.
So eating salmon could actually have benefits that go beyond just, not being hungry anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Then you have mackerel.
Okay.
It's another winner when it comes to omega-3s.
Gotcha.
And it's packed with vitamin B12.
Right. B12, that's for energy.
Yeah, energy and helps your body make red blood cells.
Okay, I'm adding mackerel to my grocery list.
Good choice.
What else is there?
Let's see, shrimp is also a great option.
Okay.
It's got lean protein and a good amount of selenium.
Right, selenium.
It's an antioxidant
What does that do?
that helps protect your cells from damage.
Okay, so is there anything on this list that, people wouldn't normally think of as a superfood?
Well, Riker actually gives a shout out to seaweed.
Seaweed?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
I know it might not sound super appetizing,
yeah, not the first thing that comes to mind.
but it's a great source of iodine,
Really?
which you need for your thyroid to work properly.
Wow, so many benefits to seafood.
There really are.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, Riker really emphasizes that it's good to eat a variety of seafood.
Right, that makes sense.
You wouldn't just eat the same vegetable every day.
Right, exactly.
It's about balance and variety.
And I guess for people who love to fish,
Yeah.
it's cool to understand how nutritious the fish they're catching is.
Right. It adds a whole other level of appreciation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
We got to talk about some of the not so great stuff too.
Yeah,
And Riker doesn't shy away from that.
I appreciate that.
Chapter 5 really gets into overfishing.
Yeah, this is a serious issue.
And he uses the Grand Banks cod collapse as an example.
What happened there?
It's a really sad story, actually.
Oh, no.
So back in the 1950s, the Grand Banks were just teeming with cod.
Wow.
Like boats could fill up their holds in a single day.
That's amazing.
But then by the 1990s, the cod were gone.
Gone, like completely.
Yeah, they disappeared.
Wow.
Decades of overfishing completely depleted this once abundant species.
Wow, so they basically fished them out of existence.
That's exactly what happened.
That's sad.
Yeah, it really shows what can happen when we don't fish responsibly.
It's not just about the fish either.
Right.
It's about the people who rely on them.
Exact. Entire industries collapse, livelihoods are destroyed, and coastal communities suffer.
It's like a domino effect.
It really is.
It's kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, the collapse of a key species like that can disrupt the whole ecosystem.
And it's not just cod, right? This could happen with other species too.
Absolutely. It's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
We need to protect our ocean.
I'm glad Riker doesn't just leave us on a down note.
Me too.
Chapter 7 gives us some hope.
Yeah, it focuses on sustainable fishing practices.
Okay, so there are ways to fish responsibly.
Exactly.
What are some of those practices?
Well, one example is rotational fishing.
Rotational fishing.
Yeah, you can think of it like crop rotation, but for the ocean.
Okay.
You close off certain areas to fishing for a while.
So they can recover.
Exactly. Gives the fish populations a chance to, bounce back.
To breathe.
Yeah, exactly. Another approach is fish farming.
Fish farming, okay.
Which can take some of the pressure off wild fish population.
But there are some controversies around that too, right?
Yeah, there are some downsides, for sure, but it's definitely part of the conversation.
Right.
It's a complex issue.
It seems like to make fishing sustainable, everyone needs to work together.
That's exactly right. It's a team effort.
Governments, organizations,
Yeah,
consumers.
all have a part to play.
Now I want to talk about something that's kind of hidden, but it has a huge impact. The fish meal industry.
Oh, yeah. Chapter 18 really digs into that.
What is fish meal exactly?
It's mostly used for livestock feed,
Okay.
and production has skyrocketed in recent decades.
Why is that?
Because there's more demand for animal protein,
Okay.
but that raises a lot of questions about sustainability.
So what's the problem with fish meal?
The problem is it uses a lot of small, oily fish,
Like what?
anchovies, sardines,
Okay.
and those fish are super important for the marine food chain.
Okay.
They're what the bigger fish eat,
Yeah.
and seabirds, and even marine mammals.
So if you take away those smaller fish,
It's like pulling a thread on a sweater.
the whole thing unravels.
Exactly.
That's a good analogy.
So Riker really highlights those environmental concerns.
Yeah.
The depleted fish population, the messed up ecosystems.
So are there any alternatives to the traditional way of making fish meal?
Yes, there are. And research is going on to find even more.
That's good.
Some promising options are things like insect-based and microalgae-based feeds.
Insect-based. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to shift gears a bit. Talk about something a little different.
Okay.
Chapter 10 explores the psychology of fishing.
Yeah, this is a fascinating chapter.
I was surprised by this one.
He really delves into the mental and emotional experiences of people who fish.
So both like people fishing for fun and people fishing for a living.
Exactly. It's about the human side of this really old practice.
Okay, so what does he say about like the psychological benefits of fishing?
Well, for recreational fishing.
Right, just fishing for fun.
Yeah, it's incredibly therapeutic.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I could see how being out on the water could be calming.
Right? It's all about connecting with nature, escaping stress, finding some peace and quiet.
Yeah.
Riker talks about how the patience that you need for fishing, the focus it requires, and that feeling of accomplishment when you catch something,
Right.
all of that can really make you feel good.
It's almost like meditation.
Yeah, in a way.
But then for commercial fishing,
It's a whole different story.
yeah, I can imagine.
It can be a really demanding and dangerous job.
Yeah.
Long hours, tough conditions, and you're often isolated.
Right, and there's the pressure to catch enough fish.
Exact, to meet those quotas. And of course, there's always risk when you're out at sea.
So that must take a toll on your mental health.
It definitely can. Riker really stresses that we needed to be more aware of those mental health challenges
Yeah.
and make sure that commercial fishermen have the support they need.
It's easy to forget that behind all the numbers,
Yeah,
there are real people doing a really difficult job.
absolutely.
Okay, so now I want to talk about a community where fishing is a huge part of their culture.
Oh, yeah.
Chapter 11 focuses on the Tlingit tribe in southeast Alaska.
It's a great example of how fishing can be so much more than just a way to get food.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about them.
Okay, so for the Tlingit people,
Yeah.
fishing is a way of life.
Okay.
It's how they've survived for centuries. Their culture, their traditions, their whole society is connected to the ocean and all the resources it provides.
Like it's woven into their very existence.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And what I find really inspiring is their deep respect for the environment.
Oh.
They're committed to sustainable fishing practices.
So they've figured out how to balance their needs with the health of the ecosystem.
Exactly. They've been doing it for centuries.
What are some of the methods they use?
Well, for example, they traditionally use fish traps instead of nets,
Okay.
which lets them be really selective about what they catch.
That makes sense.
They only take what they need.
So there's very little waste.
Yeah. And that helps ensure that the fish populations stay healthy for the long term.
Wow, we could learn a lot from them.
I agree. They're a great example of how to live in harmony with nature.
Okay, so now we need to talk about climate change.
Yeah, it's the elephant in the room, right?
It's affecting everything.
Yeah. And the fishing industry is no exception.
Chapter 12 really gets into this.
It does. Riker talks about how rising temperatures, ocean acidification, and changing currents are all impacting fish population.
And the whole industry.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
What are some of the specific challenges that climate change is causing for fishing?
One of the scariest ones is coral bleaching.
Right, I've heard about that.
As the water gets warmer, the corals get stressed out.
Yeah.
And they basically expel the algae that live inside them.
So they turn white.
Yeah, and eventually they die.
And coral reefs are super important for fish.
They're crucial. They provide a habitat for tons of marine species.
So losing them is a big deal.
It's like losing a whole city with all its people and everything that makes it work.
That's a good way to put it.
Another challenge is that fish are migrating differently.
Oh, because of the changing temperatures.
Some species are moving to new areas,
Okay.
which is messing up traditional fishing grounds.
And causing a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue with no easy answer.
It sounds a little overwhelming, to be honest.
It is, but Riker also points out that the fishing industry is pretty resilient.
Okay.
It has the ability to adapt.
So what are some of the ways they're adapting to these challenges?
Well, they're exploring new fishing grounds.
Okay.
And they're developing new fishing techniques.
Makes sense.
And there's a big push for stricter management practices to make sure that fish stocks are sustainable.
So basically, trying to find ways to deal with climate change while still providing food and jobs for people.
Yeah, it's about striking a balance.
That's a good way to put it.
It's a call to action for everyone involved.
Governments, scientists, fishermen, even consumers.
Yeah, we all have a part to play.
It sounds like the future of fishing is kind of uncertain.
It is, but there's still hope.
That's good.
If we act responsibly and are willing to change, we can protect our oceans and make sure that fishing can continue for generations to come.
That's a good message to end on.
Yeah, it's all about taking action.
So what happens next? What does Riker say about the future of fishing?
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, everyone.
We'll be back after a quick break. Welcome back. We're going to keep exploring fishing, a comprehensive exploration.
Awesome.
We've covered a lot already, from the ancient history to overfishing to climate change.
Yeah, a lot of ground.
But now I want to focus on how the fishing industry is adapting and evolving.
Yeah, how are they dealing with all these challenges?
That's what we're going to look at.
Okay.
And chapter 22 is a great place to start.
Okay.
It's called The Future of Fishing.
Ooh, that sounds exciting.
It is. It really is.
Okay, so what does the future hold?
Well, Riker talks about how technology is completely transforming the industry.
Okay, yeah, technology is changing everything these days.
Right. So let's talk high-tech fishing.
I'm ready.
What kind of advancements are we looking at?
Yeah, curious.
One of the most fascinating things is artificial intelligence.
AI? Wow.
Yeah, AI.
Okay, so how is AI being used in fishing?
Imagine algorithms that can analyze all this data about the ocean
Okay.
and predict where the fish are going to be.
Wow.
They can even help fishermen avoid catching the wrong fish.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like a super smart fishing guide.
Yeah, it's like fishing smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
So AI can help make fishing more sustainable.
Yeah, it can definitely play a role.
That's really interesting.
Riker also talks about underwater drones.
Underwater drone. That's cool.
Yeah, they're autonomous vehicles.
So they can explore the ocean on their own?
Yeah, they can go down deep, gather data about the fish populations, even inspect fishing gear.
Wow. So we can see what's happening under the water without actually having to go down there ourselves.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
But technology is just a tool.
Right.
Like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
That's true.
So the key is using it responsibly.
Yeah, to make sure that fishing can continue in a way that doesn't harm the environment.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance.
Between innovation and preservation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Now I want to talk about something completely different.
Okay, what's that?
Chapter 21 takes us on a journey through history and explores how fish have been used in religion and medicine.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting chapter.
I was surprised by this one, to be honest.
It really shows how deeply connected humans and fish have been throughout history.
Yeah, it makes you realize that fish aren't just a source of food.
Right. They've played a really important role in human beliefs and practices for centuries.
So what are some examples of fish in religion?
Well, Riker talks about how in ancient Egypt, the fish was a symbol of abundance and fertility.
Okay.
Like the god Osiris, he was often depicted with a fish tail.
Really?
Yeah, it represented his connection to the Nile River.
Which was the lifeblood of Egypt.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And then in Christianity,
Yeah.
the fish was an early symbol for Christians.
Oh yeah, I've seen that symbol before.
They used it as a secret sign when they were being persecuted.
Wow, that's powerful.
So you can see how fish have had all this symbolic meaning throughout history.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, what about the medicinal uses of fish?
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Riker gets into traditional medicine, where fish have been used to treat all sorts of ailments for centuries.
Really? Like what?
Well, one classic example is cod liver oil.
Cod liver oil. Yeah.
It's been a staple remedy for generations.
Right.
It's packed with vitamin D and those omega-3 fatty acids we talked about.
So are you saying that some of those old wives' tales about fish being good for you are actually true.
Well, it's interesting how modern science is actually validating some of those traditional remedies.
Wow.
It's not all just superstition.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's often a real scientific basis for these things.
Yeah, and it shows how much knowledge indigenous communities have accumulated over the years.
Exactly. They've been observing and experimenting for centuries.
Now let's talk about something a little more controversial.
Okay, what's that?
The aquarium trade.
Ah, yes. Chapter 20 takes a critical look at that.
Aquariums are really popular,
They are.
but there's a dark side to this industry.
There is the demand for all these exotic fish.
Yeah.
The colorful ones, the unusual ones.
It's led to overfishing.
Yeah, and the depletion of a lot of species in their natural habitats.
So basically, we love aquarium fish so much
Yeah.
that we're putting pressure on wild populations.
Exactly.
That's kind of sad.
It is. Riker talks about how these fish are often captured using really harmful methods.
Like what?
Cyanide fishing, for example.
Cyanide. That's terrible.
Yeah, it poisons the coral reef.
And kills other animals besides the fish they're trying to catch.
Exactly. It's really destructive.
It's a reminder that we need to be careful about what we buy.
Yeah, we need to think about the impact of our choices.
So is there any way to enjoy aquarium fish responsibly?
There is. Riker talks about the efforts to promote sustainable practices in the industry.
Okay, like what?
Organizations like the Marine Aquarium Council, they certify aquariums and retailers that meet certain standards.
Okay, so they're making sure the fish are sourced responsibly.
Exact, and that the animals are being treated well.
So there are ways to do it right.
Yeah, and supporting captive breeding programs is another important thing.
Captive breeding.
Yeah, so instead of taking fish from the wild,
We're breeding them in controlled environments.
exact, that takes the pressure off the wild population.
That's a good solution.
It is.
Now let's bring it a little closer to home.
Okay.
Talk about recreational fishing.
Yeah, the kind of fishing most people are familiar with.
Chapter 19 explores this.
It does. It looks at the cultural phenomenon of recreational fishing.
Yeah, it's more than just a hobby for a lot of people.
It is. It's a way of life.
And it has a big economic impact.
It does. It supports jobs, tourism, local economy.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that big.
It's huge and also plays a big role in conservation.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of recreational fishing organizations, they're advocating for sustainable practices.
Okay.
They're funding research on fish populations.
So they're actually involved in protecting the resources they enjoy.
Exactly. They're not just taking, they're giving back.
That's great.
Riker also talks about catch and release.
Catch and release. I've heard that.
Yeah, it's become really popular.
So you catch the fish,
Yeah.
but you don't keep it.
Right, you unhook it carefully and release it back into the water.
That's really cool.
It's a simple but effective way to make sure that fish populations stay healthy.
So it's good for the fish
Yeah.
and good for the future of fishing.
Exactly, it's a win-win.
Now I want to take a little history lesson.
Okay, I like history.
Chapter 17 takes us back in time
Okay.
to a series of conflicts known as the Cod Wars.
The Cod War. That sounds intense.
It was a series of confrontations between the UK and Iceland over fishing rights.
Fishing rights.
Yeah, in the North Atlantic.
Wow, over cod.
Over cod, yeah.
Okay, so what were these cod wars all about?
Basically, it was about control over these really valuable fishing grounds.
Okay.
Iceland was trying to protect their cod stocks.
Makes sense.
So they extended their exclusive fishing zone.
Okay.
But that led to clashes with British fishing vessels.
So it was a battle for resources and economic dominance.
Exactly. The Cod Wars show how important international cooperation is.
Yeah, everyone needs to be on the same page.
We need clear agreements to manage these shared fish stocks.
That's right, because fishing isn't just about catching fish
It's also about politics and economics.
and international relations.
Yeah, it's really complex.
It is.
Now let's go back to the fish meal industry for a minute.
Okay.
Chapter 18 gives us a more detailed look.
It does. It really dives deep into this often overlooked industry.
Okay, so remind us, what is fish meal again?
It's primarily used as livestock feed.
Okay.
And the demand for it has just exploded in recent decades.
Yeah, we talked about that.
It's because people are eating more meat,
Right.
but that raises a lot of concerns about sustainability.
Yeah, because fish meal relies on those small, oily fish.
Exactly, like anchovies and sardines.
And those fish are really important for the whole ecosystem.
They are. They're a vital part of the food web.
So taking too many of them can have a ripple effect.
Yeah, it's like taking out a key piece of a puzzle.
The whole thing falls apart.
Exactly.
So what's the solution?
We need to find other sources of protein for animal feed.
That makes sense.
And there's a lot of research going on in that area.
Okay, what are some of the options?
Well, insect-based protein is one promising alternative.
Insect-based.
Yeah, it might sound strange,
Yeah.
but it's actually a really good source of protein.
Huh, interesting.
And there are plant-based alternatives too.
Okay, so there are options out there.
Yeah, the future of fish meal doesn't have to be unsustainable.
That's good to hear.
It's about finding those alternatives.
Now, I want to shift back to the human element of fishing.
Okay.
Chapter 10 explores the psychology of this ancient practice.
Yeah, it's a fascinating chapter.
I've really enjoyed this one.
It looks at the mental and emotional experiences of both recreational and commercial fishermen.
So it's about the human side of fishing.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of the psychological benefits of fishing?
Well, for recreational fishing, it can be incredibly therapeutic.
Yeah, I can see how being out on the water could be really relaxing.
It is. It's all about connecting with nature, getting away from the stress of everyday life, finding some peace and quiet.
Yeah, I like that.
Riker talks about how the patience you need for fishing, the focus it requires, and the sense of accomplishment you get when you catch something,
Right.
all of that can really contribute to your well-being.
It's almost like a form of meditation.
Yeah, in a way.
But for commercial fishing.
It's a different story.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It can be a really demanding and dangerous job,
Yeah, long hours, tough conditions.
and often isolation.
Right, and there's the pressure to meet those quotas.
Exactly. And of course, there's always risk involved when you're out at sea.
So it must be really hard on your mental health.
It can be. And Riker really emphasizes that we need to be more aware of those mental health challenges
Yeah.
and make sure that commercial fishermen have the support they need.
It's easy to forget that behind all the statistics in the industry,
Yeah.
there are real people
Right.
doing a really tough job.
Okay.
Now, I want to talk about a group of people for whom fishing is much more than just a job.
Okay.
It's a way of life.
Okay.
Chapter 11 takes us to southeast Alaska
Okay.
to meet the Tlingit tribe.
The Tlingit people. Yeah.
Their relationship with fishing is incredible.
It's amazing.
It's tied to their culture, their identity,
Yeah.
even their survival.
It's woven into every aspect of their lives.
So tell me more about the Tlingit and their fishing tradition.
Well, for the Tlingit people, fishing is more than just a source of food.
Right, it's a way of life.
It's sustained them for centuries.
Wow.
Their culture, their traditions, their whole social structure is connected to the ocean and its resources.
It's like fishing is in their DNA.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And what's really inspiring is their deep respect for the environment.
Okay.
They're committed to sustainable fishing practices.
So they figured out how to take what they need without harming the ecosystem.
Yeah, they found that balance.
What are some of the sustainable methods they use?
Well, one example is they traditionally use fish traps instead of nets.
Fish traps.
Yeah, it's more selective method.
Okay.
They can choose which fish they want to catch.
So there's less waste.
Exactly. And it helps ensure that the fish populations stay healthy.
That's really cool.
It's a great example of how we can learn from indigenous cultures about living in harmony with nature.
Yeah, they have a lot of wisdom to share.
They do.
Now we need to talk about the big issue that's affecting everything these days.
Climate change.
Climate change, yeah.
It's a huge challenge.
Chapter 12 explores how it's impacting the fishing industry.
It is. It's changing everything.
So how is climate change affecting fishing?
Well, one of the most alarming things is coral bleaching.
Yeah, we talked about that a bit earlier.
As the ocean temperatures rise,
Yeah.
the corals get stressed.
Okay.
And they expel the algae that live inside them.
Right, so they turn white.
And eventually they die.
And coral reefs are like underwater cities.
They are. They're home to countless marine species.
So losing them is devastating for the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. It's a huge loss.
Another problem is that fish are migrating differently.
Yeah, as the water warms, some species are moving to new areas,
So-
which is disrupting traditional fishing grounds.
And making it harder for fishermen to know where to go.
It's creating a lot of uncertainty.
It sounds like a really complex problem.
It is. There's no easy fix.
So what can we do?
Well, Riker talks about the fishing industry's ability to adapt.
Okay.
They're exploring new fishing grounds
That makes sense.
and developing new fishing techniques.
Oh, boy.
And there's a big push for stricter management practices to protect fish stocks.
So basically, trying to find ways to mitigate the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, while still providing food and jobs for people.
It's a balancing act.
It is, and it's going to take a lot of effort from everyone involved.
Governments, scientists, fishermen, consumers.
We all have a role to play
Yeah, we need to work together
to protect our ocean.
in the future of fishing.
It's a challenge, but it's a challenge we have to face.
Now, before we wrap things up, I want to
Okay.
touch on one more topic.
Okay, what's that?
Fishing regulations.
Fishing regulations. That sounds a little boring,
Yeah, maybe.
but it's actually more interesting than you might think.
Okay, I'm listening.
Chapter 13 explores the history of fishing regulations,
Okay.
from ancient times to the present day.
So people have been trying to manage fishing for a long time.
Yeah, for centuries.
I didn't realize that.
It's fascinating to see how different cultures have approached this issue.
So what are some of the earliest examples of fishing regulation?
Riker talks about how even ancient civilizations recognized the need to manage fishing.
Really?
Yeah, like in ancient Rome.
Okay.
There were laws about what kind of fishing gear you could use
Uh,
and restrictions on where you could fish.
So they were already thinking about sustainability back then.
Yeah, in a way.
That's pretty cool.
It is. And Riker traces the development of these regulations through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, all the way to modern times.
So what are some of the key milestones in the history of fishing regulation?
One big one was the establishment of exclusive economic zones, or EEZs.
EEZs. What are those?
Basically, they give coastal nations special rights to the marine resources within a certain distance of their shore.
So that includes fishing rights.
Yeah, it was a way for countries to control their own fishing grounds.
That makes sense.
But Riker also points out that enforcing those regulations can be tricky.
Especially on the high seas.
Yeah, where it's not always clear who has jurisdiction.
Right. So it's a constant balancing act.
It is.
Between protecting fish stocks,
Yeah.
ensuring fair access to those resources,
Right.
and navigating all these international agreements.
It's complicated.
It sounds like it.
But finding that balance is essential for the future of fishing.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to talk about something that's really important to me.
What's that?
Marine conservation.
Okay, why is that so important?
Well, Riker dedicates a whole chapter to this.
Chapter 16.
Yeah, he talks about how interconnected the ocean is
Yeah.
and how vital it is to the health of our planet.
It's easy to forget that.
It is. We tend to think of the ocean as this vast, limitless resource,
Yeah.
but it's not.
It's fragile.
It is, and it's facing a lot of threats.
So protecting marine ecosystems isn't just about saving fish.
It's about safeguarding the entire web of life that depends on the ocean.
From the tiniest creature
Yeah,
to the biggest whale.
exactly. Everything is connected.
So what are some of the biggest threats to marine conservation?
Well, we've already talked about overfishing and climate change,
Yeah.
but Riker also discusses pollution,
Okay.
habitat destruction,
Right.
and invasive species.
Those are all serious problems.
They are, and they're all interconnected.
So what can we do?
Riker stresses that we need to take a holistic approach.
Okay.
We need to address these threats from all angles.
Through policy changes,
Yeah.
technological advancements,
Uh-huh.
and individual action.
We all have a part to play.
Because ultimately, the fate of the ocean is tied to our own fate.
Exactly. We're all in this together.
Wow, this has been a lot to take in.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
I feel like I've learned so much.
I'm glad.
But I'm ready for more.
Me too. In the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we'll wrap things up by exploring the economic side of the fishing industry,
Oh, yeah.
the challenges of feeding a growing global population,
Right.
and Riker's vision for the future of this vital resource.
Can't wait.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, we're back.
We are.
Ready for the final part of our deep dive into fishing, a comprehensive exploration.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Riker has to say in these last few chapters.
Me too. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to look at the economics of the fishing industry.
Okay.
The challenges of feeding a growing global population.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is.
And Riker's vision for the future of fishing.
I think it's a good way to wrap things up.
Yeah, it is.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Chapter 14 tackles a really important question.
Okay.
Can fishing help feed a growing global population?
That's the billion-dollar question, right?
It is. With more and more people in the world.
We need to find sustainable ways to feed everyone.
Exactly.
So what does Riker say?
Well, he recognizes that fishing has huge potential.
Okay.
But there are also some big challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So let's break it down.
Okay.
On the one hand, seafood is a really nutritious food source.
Yeah, we talked about all those health benefits.
It's packed with protein, omega-3s, vitamins, minerals.
And it's a really important source of food for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially in developing countries.
Where other sources of protein might be scarce.
Exactly.
So from a nutritional standpoint, seafood seems like a good option.
It is, but then there's the flip side.
The challenge.
Yeah, things like overfishing,
Right.
habitat destruction, climate change.
All putting pressure on those fish stocks.
Exactly.
So it's like, we need more fish,
Yeah.
but we're also making it harder to catch them sustainably.
It's a tough situation.
It is.
So Riker really emphasizes that we need to fish responsibly.
Okay.
We need international cooperation.
Everyone needs to be on the same page.
Right.
And we need to commit to conservation.
If we want fishing to continue to be a viable food source in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about finding that balance again.
Right. Between our needs and the needs of the ocean.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about something a little bit dark.
Okay.
Chapter 15 exposes some of the not so pretty parts of the fishing industry.
Yeah, this is a chapter that really makes you think.
It does. It talks about things like illegal fishing,
Right.
human rights abuses.
Yeah, and the environmental damage caused by certain fishing practices.
It's easy to forget that these things are happening.
It is, but it's important to be aware of them.
Yeah, we can't just ignore the dark side of the industry.
So Riker really shines a light on these issues.
Okay, like what specifically?
He talks about the exploitation of workers on fishing vessels,
Oh.
the use of forced labor.
That's terrible.
It is, and the impact of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing.
IU fishing.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
It's not just hurting the fish.
Right, it's hurting people and the environment.
So what can we do about it?
Well, as consumers, we can be more informed.
Oh.
We can support businesses that are doing things the right way.
Ethically and sustainably.
Exactly.
It's about making conscious choices.
Yeah, and using our purchasing power to make a difference.
That's a good point.
Okay, now let's switch gears again.
Okay.
Let's talk about something a little more uplifting.
All right.
Chapter 21 explores the world of fish in medicine.
Fish in medicine. That's interesting.
It is. It's a really fascinating chapter.
So tell me more.
Well, Riker takes us through the history of using fish and fish-derived products for medicinal purposes. And it turns out that fish have been used in traditional medicine for centuries.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
What are some examples?
Well, cod liver oil is a classic one.
Cod liver oil. Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's been used for generations to treat all sorts of things.
Really?
And then there's shark cartilage.
Shark cartilage.
Yeah, people have used that for joint pain.
Wow, so some of those old folk remedies actually work.
Well, modern science is actually validating some of those traditional uses.
That's really cool.
It turns out that certain fish species have some surprising medicinal properties.
Like what?
Well, we already know that omega-3 fatty acids are good for your heart.
Right.
But research is also showing that they might be beneficial for your brain.
Really?
Yeah, and they might help reduce inflammation.
So there's a lot more to fish than meets the eye.
There really is.
We're still learning about all the amazing things they can do.
Okay, now let's revisit the aquarium trade.
Okay.
We talked about it a bit earlier.
Yeah, the dark side of the industry.
Right, but chapter 20 goes into more detail.
Okay, so what does Riker have to say?
Well, he talks about the demand for exotic fish.
Yeah, all those colorful and unusual species.
And how that demand is impacting marine ecosystems.
Because it's leading to overfishing.
Exact. And destructive fishing practices.
It's like we want to have a piece of the ocean in our home,
Yeah.
but we're not always thinking about the consequences.
That's right. So Riker encourages us to be informed consumers.
Okay.
To choose fish from reputable.
That are practicing sustainability.
Exact. And he also highlights the importance of captive breeding programs.
Right, because if we can breed fish in captivity,
We don't have to take them from the wild.
which helps protect those wild populations.
It's a win-win.
Okay, now for the grand finale.
The future of fishing.
Chapter 22.
It's all about technology and how it's changing the industry.
Give me a glimpse into the future.
Okay, are you ready for this?
I am.
Artificial intelligence.
AI again.
Yeah, AI is playing a huge role in the future of fishing.
Okay, how so?
Riker talks about how AI can analyze huge amounts of data
Okay.
to predict where fish are going to be, to
Oh.
optimize fishing routes.
So it's like having a supercomputer as your fishing guide.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And AI can even help reduce bycatch.
So we're not accidentally catching the wrong fish.
Exact. It's about making fishing more efficient and sustainable.
And then there are underwater drones.
Yeah, these things are incredible.
What can they do?
They can explore the ocean depths,
Okay.
gather data on fish population,
Okay.
even inspect fishing gear.
So we can see what's happening under the water without actually having to go down there ourselves.
Exact. It's like having eyes on the bottom of the ocean.
That's incredible.
It is, but Riker makes a really important point.
What's that?
Technology is just a tool.
Okay.
It's up to us to use it wisely,
To make sure it's being used for good.
to protect our oceans and the future of fishing.
Yeah, I agree.
We can't just rely on technology to solve all our problems.
We need to be responsible.
Exactly.
Well, that was quite a journey.
It was, wasn't it?
We've covered so much ground
From the ancient history of fishing.
to the cutting edge technology that's shaping its future.
It's a fascinating and complex topic.
It is, and I feel like I've learned a lot.
Me too.
If there's one thing I'm taking away from this book,
Yeah,
it's that the future of fishing is in our hands.
I agree.
We all have a role to play in making sure it's a sustainable future.
Whether you're a fisherman
A seafood lover.
or just someone who cares about the planet.
We can all make a difference.
That's the message I hope people take away from this.
Me too.
And if you want to learn more,
You can pick up a copy of Fishing, a comprehensive exploration.
it's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks.
It's a really great read.
It is. I highly recommend it.
All right, well, that's it for our deep dive.
Yeah, I think we covered it all.
Thanks for joining me.
It was my pleasure.
And thanks to everyone listening.
Until next time.